It might not take long for rookie safety Jonas Sanker to earn a starting role with the New Orleans Saints. We got all that and a little bit of lanyard for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I am your host, your friend, Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, your New Orleans Saints expert and credentialed member of the media covering those New Orleans Saints as a Saints beat writer over at LouisianaSports.net. And on today's episode of Locked On Saints, the Yak should be back for the New Orleans Saints in 2025. The Saints' interior defensive line is going to see a little bit of musical chairs. We'll take a look at who can take a seat where, and we'll kick everything off with another deep dive with another member of the Saints' 2025 draft class, Jonas Sanker. The Virginia safety could earn a starting role sooner than many expect. We got all that and a little more for you on today's show. We appreciate you very much, whether it's your first time or your next time being here with us this time, making us your first listen, and being an everydayer here on the show, which is a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets if you just win your first $5 bet. Head over to FanDuel.com to get started today. The New Orleans Saints selected with the 93rd overall pick in the third round of this year's NFL draft, Virginia safety Jonas Sanker. And I wanted to take a moment. We've been kind of going through and doing a deep dive in each of the rookies in the rookie class so far. And so now that we've looked at a bunch of these guys, I want to just keep kind of moving along. And I wanted to double back to Jonas Sanker. We discussed Vernon Broughton, his third round draft mate, the other day. We talked about Danny Stutzman, who was drafted in the fourth round yesterday. But I wanted to come back to Jonas Sanker because he's another one of these players that could potentially work himself into a starting role sooner than people realize. And yes, that could mean 2025 if there are injuries ahead of him, but 2026, if he proves to be the guy that Kellen Moore said that they were so excited and fired up to still have on the board at pick 93 overall, he could walk right into a starting role next to Justin Reid if the days of Tyrann Mathieu in New Orleans come to an end after the 2025 season. Remember, Mathieu has that incentive-heavy deal. Now he's still making around a little bit over $6 million in terms of just a base salary or in terms of a cap hit here in 2025. So it's likely he's going to be on the field. I wouldn't be worried about that. But obviously the Saints are either preparing themselves in case they have some kind of attrition at the position, or they're preparing themselves for what life could look like after Tyrann Mathieu. And Jonas Sanker was a solid investment, a 6 foot, 206 pound safety that was described as Louis Riddick as being instinctive, a stud, a great tackler, smart, plays with anticipation and range, and will contribute quickly. And I think all of those things are absolutely true if you go and take a look at his tape and you watch some of the things that he did over in Virginia. It was so easy to kind of talk about him the day of the draft because of the solid tackling that he brings to the position. He's a guy that plays all over the field and is most well known because of his tackling ability. Only missed 13 tackles last season. That was a 13% missed tackle rate. Not bad for a safety, right? And so when you look at the defensive backs, the smaller guys that might be going up against big tight ends or bigger running backs and things like that, you expect probably to see the missed tackle rate be a little bit high. For Jonas Sanker, 13% is a very solid missed tackle rate for his position. Over the course of his career, that number doesn't go up, but drops to 10.6%. So we knew that that was something that he was going to be able to do. He ended up totaling 98 combined tackles last season, 8.5 of which being for a loss. And he also got himself a pair of sacks, 5 passes defended, and an interception. And that's kind of the other piece to his game that people don't talk about. He's very disruptive at the catch point. 15 passes defended over the course of the last 2 years, though only 1 interception. But still, if you can force incompletions, that's something that NFL coaches are going to love. So getting up there and making an impact at the position, both in the run game as well as in the passing game, are things that are going to kind of boost Jonas Sanker's development, first of all, but also just boost his potential in terms of what his ceiling can look like in the NFL and how quickly he can work his way out onto the field. If you're somebody that was drafted to be a defensive back in the third round and you're really only good in one area, in coverage or in the run, you're going to be looked at as a little bit of a liability. But when you're somebody that's able to come in, or at least on one side of those coins, right? And so at least if you're able to come in and have some value and bring some value and efficiency, effectiveness, production in both areas of the game, the way that Jonas Sanker has, it kind of erases that, oh, can't have you on the field for rundowns, or, oh, can't have you on the field for coverage downs. He does a pretty good job with both. And honestly, having a guy like Justin Reid be a part of the future tandem at safety is great for Jonas Sanker, because if he's somebody that the Saints feel better about playing near the line of scrimmage, Brandon Staley getting him involved in sort of those versatile crash down Derwin James type safety plays, then all of a sudden you can have a guy like Justin Reid that you can deploy deep and feel very comfortable with that because of Justin Reid's coverage ability. So you could play Jonas Sanker to maybe what is his biggest strength, but I do think that his coverage game is very underrated. When I tell you, or when I ask you to think about the thing that kind of drives you nuts the most as a Saints fan when it comes to New Orleans Saints defenses going up against passing attacks of the past, I'm sure you don't have to go very far down the list to get to crossing routes. Crossing routes is something that Kellen Moore found a lot of success with just last year against the New Orleans Saints, the big Dallas Goedert 61-yard catch and run in week 3, for instance. But Jonas Sanker has it littered all over his tape, his ability to crash down, get downhill, and make plays at those kind of comebacks in the middle of the field, but also taking away some of those crossing routes over the middle of the field, and doing so in one of 3 ways, either by breaking the pass up or making a play on the football, making contact with the receiver, forcing them not to be able to reel the ball in, or at least taking the receiver down at the catch point, which I think is a huge, huge thing for any safety that is transitioning from college to the NFL. If you can find somebody that brings in the opportunity for you to be able to limit those plays at the catch point, that is going to be big. On average per reception, he's only notched with 10.8 yards, 10.8 yards per reception, and only surrendered 106 yards after the catch as a safety. And his longest completion against him as the nearest defender was only 37 yards. And a lot of his yards after catch, look at this, or let me tell you, first 4 weeks, 0 yards, 0 yards, 0 yards, 0 yards, 21 yards, 7 yards, 21 yards, and then 46 yards. So struggled a little bit in the middle of the season, but towards the end of the season, -1 yards after catch, 9 yards after catch, 4 yards after catch, -1 yards after catch, going up against teams like North Carolina, Notre Dame, SMU, who's a big yards after catch team, and also finding success early in the season going up against teams like Maryland, as well as Louisville, where he found some success up against that team as well, and only allowing 7 yards after catch in that game. So his ability to make these plays at the catch point, I think, is a shining part of his game. Let me tell you the last thing that I wanted to highlight about Jonas Sanker, and this one goes to our good friend Dylan Sanders, who's our host over at the Saints Squad. He put this out the day that he was selected by the New Orleans Saints in the 3rd round. This guy has played over 900 snaps in the box, over 570 snaps at free safety, and over 730 snaps in the slot. 961, 530, 573, and 735, if you want the exact numbers there. Has played in the box, has played deep, has played in the slot, has the versatility to also be able to contribute, move around, and most importantly, perhaps, help Brandon Staley disguise his defense when Jonas Sanker and Justin Reid are on the field, just like you can with Tyrann Mathieu and Justin Reid on the field as well. That all of that together is why I think Jonas Sanker can get to a starting role sooner than many expect. Coming up next, let's take a look at the New Orleans Saints defensive line, which is sure to see some musical chairs. So I'll tell you the seats that each of these players could end up manning. We got that coming up for you next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Summer sports are in full swing, and that means that you can get in whether it's baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or maybe even getting into some soccer action. You can get in on all of that action over at FanDuel.com today. You already know that you're going to be watching all of these games, so why not make it a little bit more thrilling, a little bit more interesting? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while all your friends end up getting sunburnt out on the beach. Everything from new daily promotions that they'll have that helps keep everything fresh, to being able to put down a same game parlay or even live betting, maybe bet on something going into the stretch of the ninth inning, or get ahead of some stuff. The New Orleans Saints 5.5 wins. They're going to come in at more or less. You can get in on that over at FanDuel today. Are you new to FanDuel? Well, that's good news, because new customers can get $150 in bonus bets. All you got to do is win your first $5 bet. Open up the FanDuel app or head over to FanDuel.com to get started today. All right, family, the New Orleans Saints are going to see a lot of moving around throughout training camp on the defensive line, in particular in the interior of that defensive line, which now has 3 roles for players. So I want to take a look at the numerous interior defensive linemen that are on the New Orleans Saints roster, where they might fit in going into training camp, and kind of what we're going to be watching all throughout as the Saints look to kind of install and implement that new 3-4 defense. We appreciate you very much for being here with us. I want to remind you about our Saints Squad show real quick, 7:30 a.m. Monday and Thursday, and it lives on all podcast feeds and on YouTube every day. Beyond that, myself, Dylan Sanders from Saints Wire, former New Orleans Saints wide receiver Lance Moore, and John Hendricks from New Orleans Football, all on that show every Monday and Thursday. Come through and check us out, whether live or later. I think that you will enjoy it. If nothing else, we just have a ton of fun. We have a ton of fun. All right, so I want to take a look at the 3 different spots, if you will, that the Saints could or really already have some personnel that they're trying to fit in when it comes to that 3-4 defense. Remember, the Saints, their interior defensive line unit is largely unchanged in that there's not a lot of departure. Basically, Tono Passanio is out, and guys on the practice squad like Jack Heflin are out. But outside of that, it's just been new faces and faces that you already know. And one of the big question marks when the Saints hired Brandon Staley is whether or not the Saints have the personnel to go from that multiple 4-3, 4-2-5 type defense that they had, meaning 4 down linemen, 3 linebackers, or in a 4-2-5 sense, 2 linebackers with 5 defensive backs, now going into this kind of more odd front heavy 3-4 defensive line, which will include 3 down linemen and 4 edge rushers, which will include 2 stand-up edge rushers. Now, with all of the changes that are going on with the Saints defense, it's really easy to get excited about those stand-up edge rushers. Chase Young, Carl Granderson, those guys are right back where they're most comfortable. Isaiah Foskey potentially has a chance to take a step forward. A guy like Fadil Diggs fits right in, who the Saints drafted in the 7th round. Cam Jordan gets to pick up that role. But when it comes to the defensive interior, things are a little bit different, because you have 3 of those guys now instead of just 2 of those guys with 2 down linemen as your defensive ends. And so now there's kind of 2, 3, 4 ends, and then that nose tackle that lines up literally nose to nose with the center, hence nose tackle. And so I wanted to take a look at the nose tackles, the 3-4 defensive ends, and the guys that can kind of do both. And this is mostly looking at these players based on their physical traits, right? And remember that football is not all about you don't play the position you look like you can play. You play the position you have the talent to play, right? And so we can think about guys like Tyrann Mathieu, for all intents and purposes, should not be a guy just based on his size and his build that plays the position safety as well as he plays, yet despite that, he's going into the Hall of Fame someday. You understand what I'm saying? And so it's not just about, are you the size to play the position? Do you have the skill to play the position? So I'm looking at this from size now, and then when we get into training camp, we'll learn a little bit more about the skill side. But I do think that some of these guys we can already kind of answer the skill question with. So let's start with the nose tackles, because that's kind of the newest position, newest responsibility for this New Orleans Saints team, this zero tech. So zero, basically every gap on an offensive line or on a defensive line has a number, and it starts from the center and then it goes out. And it doesn't matter if you're going out to the left or going out to the right, the numbers are all the same. So you're going 0 when you're standing over the center, but then if you're in the gap between the center and the guard, then you're in the 1 gap or the 1 technique. And so that is on either side. So you go like 0, then outwards to either side. You go 1, 2i, 2, 3, 4i, 4, 5, and then so on and so forth until you're out there by the tight ends and all those stuff. The only time that it gets a little bit confusing is that for whatever reason, and I need to look this up for the reason why, maybe one of you could tell me, but the numbers switch as you get around the tight ends. The inside of the tight end shoulder spot is 7 instead of 6. On top of the tight end is 6. And then on the outside is kind of 8 and 9. And so that's why that's where it gets a little bit confusing. But outside of that, it's pretty simple. And so that 0 technique is that nose tackle right in the middle. The guys that can play that role based on their physical traits, which are typically over 6 feet or over, and then over 320 pounds. That's usually the kind of mold that you want there. Not strictly, but it's usually what you're looking for. Saunders, absolutely there. John Ridgway III, who the Saints traded for at the beginning of last season, absolutely there. 321, so he's just right there. Christian Boyd, who played this very role a lot at the University of Northern Iowa before he was drafted by the Saints in the 6th round last year. And then undrafted free agent Amari Thomas maybe fits here as well. He's a 320 plus pound former offensive lineman that's converted to defensive end / defensive lineman. So we'll see where he really fits in. But build wise, he makes sense there. When it comes to the 3-4 ends, that's where you're looking for guys that are taller, maybe a little bit more slim, maybe a little bit more athletic as well. But make no mistake about it, every single one of these guys, whether they're at 313 pounds, 298 pounds, or 325 pounds, they're all athletic. So it's not really a question of that, but just the guys that feel like they are those typically 4i or 5 tech players who are lining up over the top of the tackles, sometimes in between the tackling guards, still playing that 3 tech role there, but getting the opportunity to be more pass rushers while also winning some one-on-ones to get involved in the run game, all these other pieces. So those players for me that are going to be able to be very good 3-4 ends, Bryan Bresee, I'm so excited to see him in that role. This fits him so perfectly. He's got the size, he's got the height, and he has insane athleticism and good pass rush moves. This is going to fit him to a T. So I'm super excited for him there. So Bryan Bresee, Jonah Williams, who the Saints brought in, a guy that's got some familiarity with Brandon Staley. I think he fits in perfectly there as well. And then Nathan Shepard, I think fits there really well. Also played this role a little bit during some of his stint with the New York Jets. And so I think that this fits all of them. Now, the third position is one that is that of versatility, who can play the 3-4 defensive end, but also play the nose tackle. What I didn't include in this conversation are guys like Chase Young and Cam Jordan, who could be stand-up edge rushers, but who could also be 3-4 defensive ends. I didn't want to blur the line between the interior and the edge, so I kept the edge out of the conversation. But versatility within the interior is very important. Guys that can play the nose tackle role, but also move to one side or the other to be a 3-4 defensive end. That's where the trade acquisition of Davon Godchaux is going to be huge, the former LSU Tiger. And then Vernon Broughton, who was drafted in the 3rd round, who we discussed, has really good pass rush moves and has the ability to also stand up against the run game. And so him playing in the middle of the defense at that nose tackle role or moving outside at the 3-4 defensive end, that gives both of these guys the opportunity to play to their strengths as athletic pass rushers, but also really, really solid and reliable run stoppers in the middle as well. So that's some of the musical chairs that we're going to be watching and where it's all going to start. Coming up next, let's keep this conversation going. I'm going to tell you specifically what it is that we're looking for when it comes to these names during training camp in terms of what will help to separate them. And then beyond that, we'll dive into yards after catch and why they're going to be so incredibly important for the New Orleans Saints in 2025. We got that coming up for you next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. If the New Orleans Saints can improve one thing in their offensive passing game, it's yards after catch, and they might be in position to get it done. This has been a big sort of sour spot for the New Orleans Saints over the course of the past 4 years or so. They are a team that used to thrive when it came to producing yards after catch, and in some cases being near the top of the NFL in the metric, like back in 2019 when the team ranked number 2 overall in the league when it came to total yards after catch over the course of the past 4 years, the Saints have been in the bottom third of the NFL, with their best ranking coming last year in 2022, a year where we thought the Saints were absolutely going to take a step forward in this metric in Clint Kubiak's offense, but with a combination of quarterback injuries, wide receiver injuries, and a scheme that never really felt like it got its full breadth of what it could do going, they did not do that. And they come up a little short last year with the number 22 ranking. Back in 2021, they were number 30. In 2022, they were number 25. In 2023, they were number 24. And then last year in 2024, they were number 22. So they have gotten better each and every year. But the hope now is that going into 2025, that this team will be even better in this metric. One of the big reasons why I'm pushing this metric again this year is because I think that it helps to explain the idea of what it is that New Orleans Saints might be trying to build with their offensive, or rather with their wide receiver room. Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, Brandin Cooks sitting at the top of that. More speed with Bub Means, more speed with Mason Tipton, more speed with Moochie Dixon, more speed with some of the other guys on this roster as well. And so I do think that this team has leaned in on the idea of speed over size. And I think that that is something that is evident all in itself with the investments that were made this offseason, headlined, of course, by Brandin Cooks. So I think that that's one thing. The other reason why I think that this is a really important metric for New Orleans to get right in 2025, even though they might not throw a lot of passes this year, and it might be a very run-heavy approach. We'll get to some of the numbers from Kellen Moore's Philadelphia Eagles last year in just a moment that kind of highlight why that could be the case. But that could be the situation for New Orleans with two young quarterbacks, one of which will get the week 1 start. Maybe we'll get every start. We'll see. But we'll see which way things go. But in any case, they will have a young quarterback that is taking those snaps throughout the 2025 season, either a rookie in Tyler Shuck or a second-year guy in Spencer Rattler. And so lessening the degree of difficulty on throws is a good thing. But in order to lessen the degree of difficulty, it doesn't mean that you can't pick up chunk plays. You just need those chunk plays to be created after the catch. So it's going to be on the New Orleans Saints offense, particularly led by the play calling of Kellen Moore, as well as, of course, the individual efforts of the players to be able to take advantage of those opportunities. Kellen Moore is going to have to scheme up an offensive game plan that's going to be able to get the ball in the hands of these receivers in space and allow them to utilize their speed. And those receivers are going to have to utilize their speed, their agility, their open field ability once they get the ball in their hands in order to maximize what that yardage could look like, thereby lessening the degree of difficulty of the throw, but still creating impact plays once the ball is in the hands of the receiver. Now, I'm talking a lot about wide receivers in this, but look, Juwan Johnson has been one of the Saints' most consistent yards after catch threats, his ability after the catch. Alvin Kamara has good ability after the catch. We'll see where Velus Jones Jr. ends up contributing, and then we'll see when Taysom Hill is able to be back as well. And all of those pieces also contribute to yards after catch, along with Foster Moreau and any other players that make the roster that could run a route, catch a pass, and then go and pick up yards after they've gotten that. In fact, actually, that's been a pretty solid part of Kendre Miller's game when he's been utilized in the passing game, which has been a little bit of a rarity over the course of his 2 years early on, but we'll see how things go in year 3 here as he looks to really carve out his opportunity to impact in a New Orleans Saints uniform. Let's talk more about Kellen Moore. So I'll go back a little bit further than last year first. Kellen Moore put together top 10 offenses when it came to yards after catch in 2020 and 2021 with the Dallas Cowboys. Those were years where they were a little bit healthier, all of those other things. But top 10, they were number 9 in each of those years, picking up those yards after catch. So good stuff there from Kellen Moore and what he's been able to produce yards after catch wise in the past. Last year, the Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles finished number 30 in the NFL in that metric. They were the 3rd worst team in picking up yards after catch, but there is some context to that. The Philadelphia Eagles threw the 4th fewest amount of passes last season. They ranked number 29 in the NFL in passes thrown. But on top of all of that, and despite that, when it came to yards after catch over expectation, that is where the Eagles finished number 10 overall. And that shows you that from an efficiency standpoint, because that yards after catch over expectation or over what's expected metric takes into account how often the ball was thrown, the situations that the ball was caught under, the situations in which those passes were delivered. Kind of takes a little bit more stuff into considerations, more metrics, more nuance into that. And it makes it an efficiency rating as opposed to a total number. And so from a yards after catch over expectation area, the Philadelphia Eagles were top 10. So they were still producing on a per catch basis after the catch very well, even though they finished with the number 30 or finished number 30 in the NFL when it came to yards after catch in total. Understanding that they threw the fourth fewest passes shows you that there weren't as many opportunities for yards after catch. That's why the overall number was low, but that they continued to go out there and get those additional yards after catch anyway. On an individual pass to Dallas Goedert up against the Green Bay Packers, for instance, they picked up 20 yards after the catch over what was expected. And so that's how quickly that offense was able to get things going. So I think that by maximizing guys like Chris Olave, Rashid, Shaheed, and making those passes easier for the quarterbacks by picking up those yards after the catch, that's going to be very, very helpful for this New Orleans Saints passing offense. All right, y'all, coming up in tomorrow's episode, we'll take a more in-depth look at Quincy Riley, the Louisville corner who could play his way into a starting role as soon as his rookie year, but certainly during his rookie contract. We appreciate you very much, as always, making us a part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me in the show. If you see me, please say hi. If you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, N-O-L-A. Hit me up. Know what the family's doing, how you living. Let me know how you momming them. And trust you, that nation. I'll holla at you.